it will have to be if he decides this. And the way he speaks is that he's made a decision. He just doesn't know how or when. And some clever boy will come up to him and say, what Malcolm Nance has said, right? 2 a.m. special operations, unmarked civil airliner with special forces, rangers, combat controllers, and U.S. Marshals to take over the police, immigration, customs, and enforcement SWAT teams, because these people are going to have to be processed as U.S. citizens, right? And then he'll come, he'll raise, if he lands at that airport and raises that flag, he'll call it the United States and dare anyone to come and take it from him. Then he'll follow on with more heavy forces. That's the worst case, least likely scenario as far as we're concerned. But for him, it's very high probability.
Well, Malcolm Nance, thank you very much for joining me. Malcolm, you've been in Greenland for the last week or so as Trump
Mm.
sticks to his line that Greenland must become somehow a part of the US. What have you found out on your trip there?
Well, number one thing that I found out is that the people of Greenland want nothing to do with this idea of Donald Trump having any hold over Greenland. There is a movement within the country that is seeking some form of independence from Denmark at some future date. But this is a tightly woven society that has a deep Danish history, has a deep history with, the local peoples. Here in Nuuk, the capital, which was founded 300 years ago. Oh no, actually, that wasn't 300 years ago. It was in the late 1700s. This particular place, by Lutheran missionaries who settled all up and down the coast. The Inuit people here really believe in the relationship that they have with Denmark. There are many Danish citizens here as well. And that has now been intruded upon by this belief by the United States that they could just walk in, right, and take this over and believe that these people will be better off for it. And that is absolutely not going to happen in terms of if they have a say about it.
And what is the sentiment among Greenlanders? I mean, is this more of a wider issue with America, or is it
Mm.
specifically this bombastic language that we've heard from Trump?
Oh, it's certainly not a problem with Americans. It's a problem with the Trump administration. And like you said, they're bombast. I've been greeted just with open arms. People here love having tourists. They love having Americans. Everybody should come to Greenland at some point because it's really a hidden jewel. I mean, if you can cope with the large expanses of ice, it's its very size, and the very small settlements of people that comprise approximately 57 to 60,000 people that will surprise you, that they want to live in these conditions. This is their culture, this is their people. They're very deeply tied to each other by family and faith. Very Christian country, uh, but they love tourists, they love tourism. I took a ferry from Ilulissat, which is up in the north. A exciting trip, considering we drove through icebergs and ice fields for 7 hours. But the people I spoke to all wanted to know why I was there and what I thought of Greenland and the people. I was quite surprised that the receptionist at my hotel was on her way to New York, actually, and then to Tampa. So, even they get caught up, a little sick of the ice to a certain extent. But they, as a culture here, they have no problem with foreigners coming to visit, showing their culture off. They're very proud of it, and that was actually really pleasing.
From what you've seen, what do Greenlanders think of the current level of cooperation between the US and Greenland? Are they happy for that to continue, or do you think this whole experience could start to drive a wedge between the US government and the government over in Greenland?
Well, first off, there is no presence of the U.S. Government or military here, certainly in the capital in the South. Now, you will see every time to time, just happened yesterday. The U.S. Air National Guard out of my state, an air base that I found is about 30 kilometers from my home, is the one that flies the ski planes that brings the National Science Foundation out to a very remote air base called Kanjalushat. That's out on the ice cap, right? The Russell ice cap. And they conduct scientific patrols. They fly way, way out to places like Station Nord, where they do deep core ice drilling. And that is a part of their fabric here. They don't even notice those airplanes because they have the big red tails and they have the skis on them. And they've been coming, US planes have been flying here since 1941. So, they're very happy to let that continue. The question is, when you had interruptions like when Usha Vance was going to come here, and you have other C-130s flying here that are all gray and carrying armed men and armored vehicles, in a town like Nuuk, you're going to have to work really hard to justify why you would have one armored vehicle. You could have had a small Toyota Land Cruiser, like we had in Iraq, as opposed to big giant Suburbans, storming a town where, the biggest thing you have is a Toyota Hilux. So they don't want that. They don't want a higher level of presence. I spoke to a member of parliament yesterday who gave me a really good feeling about what I had been seeing. And he said, we're the most peaceful people you'll ever find. We are original pacifists. And this is just dropped in on us like a giant solid rock of ice into a small pond, right? And of course, you do that, and you're likely to fracture the rest of the frozen pond that you're standing on. So they don't want that part of it. And the threats, the sudden flying in, these things that Greenland must be under the control of the United States. Greenland will be part of, America's national security. They may be a small group of people, but they're a very proud group of people, and like I said, a very deep history that we're just literally want to parachute into and seize from them. And one last thing, what are we going to do? Take away their great healthcare here? Take away their awesome schools and education? Their schools here are an envy. The Danish have done things right with regards to bringing the infrastructure, assisting the people in the culture. And the Danes here are Greenlanders. They're not Danes, right? They like that being called the Greenlandic people and speaking the local language. So I think that so long as if that rhetoric can be lowered or taken away, this issue could be ended, then this country will go back to the prosperity it deserves.
And I want to come on to some of what the US has been offering around this idea of Greenland. But before that, when we last spoke, you discussed how if the US military was essentially forced to, they might
Mhm.
go for a military takeover of Greenland. Starting with seizing the capital in Nuuk via the airport. I mean, is there anything you've seen that has changed your assessment of that?
Only one thing, and I still believe that if Trump is erratic enough, and unstable enough to view this as something he's being denied, and when you see his trip to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, he is now, how can I put it? He is now enjoying the idea that his word is law and that other super insanely rich people who can change history and destiny are listening to him. And that some of his aides, let me tell you, he has some very squirrely aides, people who should have no presence near the levers of government, right? Who are dismantling the United States and treating our own people as if we're, people to be abused with their own internal paramilitary force now. I mean, and then you can imagine him thinking, I will expand the territory of the United States and ordering a mission to come here. And as I said before, if you just order it to general military units, units that haven't been vetted for secrecy and loyalty, right? then you're going to get like a week's warning. Everyone will call their mom and go, "I'm going to Greenland, and we're going to seize, Kanjaluswak Airport, and we're going to do a para jump in." That will never happen, but it will have to be if he decides this. And the way he speaks is that he's made a decision. He just doesn't know how or when. And some clever boy will come up to him and say, what Malcolm Nance has said, right? 2 a.m. special operations, unmarked civil airliner with special forces, rangers, combat controllers, and U.S. Marshals to take over the police, immigration, customs, and enforcement SWAT teams, because these people are going to have to be processed as U.S. citizens, right? And then he'll raise, if he lands at that airport and raises that flag, he'll call it the United States and dare anyone to come and take it from him. Then he'll follow on with more heavy forces. That's the worst case, least likely scenario as far as we're concerned. But for him, it's very high probability. Now, what could thwart that? Weather. I'm going to tell you, if there's anything that I've learned in the last week, and I'll be here for another, I'll be pushing 2 weeks when I leave. The weather has something to say about this. Mother Nature up here is very fickle. And when I was flying out from Nuuk to Ilulissat, I had to put on all of my heavy Arctic gear, right? 8,000-meter gear to stay warm because we got blitzed with an unseasonable blizzard here. The temperature is -10, wind chill down to -20. And then they called and they go, "Oh, your flight's flying, though." Every other flight was canceled. Every other city, every other country. They go, "Your flight's flying." Get on the airplane. We fly out in this insane storm, land in the Lulusa, and it is beautiful and warm, the exact opposite of what it's supposed to be. So I put on all my light gear in the Arctic Circle, and in the South, I had to come back in bunker gear, and that is going to defeat anything that the United States proposes to do. If the pilots in Ilulissat, where the ice fjord is, again, we went through icebergs for hours. If they refuse to allow a U.S. warship to come into that port, or they blockade it, you're not getting through that ice field. You can try. There's no sand beaches in this country. Everything is rock. It will smash you to smithereens, and you'll waste a $500 million ship thinking that you can outsmart the locals. And the locals here will not assist you. And so that's the only thing that's really got my attention, is the weather and the terrain. Like Clint Eastwood said in the old movie The Eiger Sanction, when he was supposed to assassinate a guy, "I don't have to kill him. The mountain will kill him."
On the other side of this, we're hearing the US might consider something along the lines of what they'd call a compact of free
Mm.
association that would let Greenland effectively maintain its independence, but the US would provide things for them, security and so forth. Is there any level of closer association along those lines that Greenland might accept?
Well, Greenland certainly won't accept any of that. I mentioned that yesterday to this member of parliament. He laughed and laughed and laughed and ordered another tea. So, they don't even understand why this is happening here. They look at charts, from the Danish mineralogical ministry, and they say, yeah, there's gold here. Yeah, there are rare earth minerals here. Yeah, there's all this great stuff here. You have to go under 2 kilometers of ice to get it. And the mines that have been here for a long while, that have been worked, most of the concessions are owned by the Canadians, who really know how to mine in, deep, harsh terrain. This isn't the 19th century where you could just bring a railroad line up here and start slave laboring. Also, who exactly will be working these mines? The locals have their own life. They have their own income. They have their own standard of living. So by using this administrative trick, where supposedly the United States is going to provide your military protection, Well, how did that work out for the Kurds in northern Iraq, right? We sold them out in a heartbeat. So it's just an administrative trick to get one step closer to saying, well, now we're just going to make you a U.S. territory. You notice they don't talk about Greenland as a state; they just talk about it as an acquisition. And the one crazy idea I heard was they were talking about like using administrators from Alaska who know how to deal with, and I'm not joking, they said those Eskimos, okay, which is an archaic racist term which doesn't even recognize who these people are. Like you're going to create, it's like Bangladesh and Pakistan, you're going to create East Alaska and West Alaska. This is just a crazy tech bro driven, billionaire driven fantasy that really stems from some form of science fiction and not from the hard realities that Denmark is here. They're one of their three corvettes is in the port. And if the United States wants Denmark to provide more security, if I were the Danes, I would say, taking you up on that. I'm going to station our 1,500 Marines in Greenland. We're going to start exercising and carrying out joint exercises with the other NATO European countries. We invite you to send 10 guys like they do every year, and we'll start taking over our defense. But now that puts a defensive force in the way of America's, hegemonistic and very clearly imperialistic view of we're just going to take it. I mean, I really, every time Trump talks like this, imagine him in a top hat and a Snidely Whiplash mustache, thinking he's going to get his train line to go up there and coolies to start working the mines. This is just as racist and as silly as one could imagine.
Well, on that wider security issue, NATO's former Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen called Trump's threats this week shameless. Um, how seriously could, and I suppose has, this damaged the US alliance with the rest of Europe?
Well, Trump has damaged the alliance with the rest of Europe by his mere presence and his attitude towards Europe. For a man whose family came from Scotland and Germany, this is quite a stunning turnaround of an attitude. But it really stems from the way that he was brought up. He's never in his entire life ever shopped for a groceries, right? He has never in his entire life done anything. I mean, look, he had like $1 million treasure chest when he was 6 months old. He was a tax break for his father for his entire life, and he inherited a quarter of $1 billion. And now he sees Europe as this sort of place that won't accept him as a person. So his own insecurities are driving this. But then again, he'll fly to the Middle East to the oil sheikhs and be treated like a god, which is what he wants. He doesn't want to be treated as an equal. He wants to be treated as a better, and he wants to be feted. And the only time he ever had a good time in England, well, or not in England, in Europe, was when he went to Bastille Day and came up with this idea of a fantastical parade for himself on June 14th of this year. I mean, he even insulted the Queen twice, refused to, maintain protocol by, walking behind the Queen at Buckingham Palace. I think that his view of Europe is such that the word shameless is a badge of honor to him. I've insulted them. He sees Russia, for example, as more along his liking, right? A dictatorship where you could just do what you want and be an oligarch and enjoy it. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was uh the movie The Dictator, where where um where the lecture about it's just better to be a dictator and kill your political enemies and insult anybody you want, and then they'll still come crawling to you for your resources. I'm wondering whether he watched that and thought that was a documentary or a training course. So but the way that he is attacking Denmark, a country of 5 million people. There are 340 million Americans. I'm African American. There are 42 million African Americans alone in our country, and a country as industrious as Denmark. I mean, they control 20% of the world's shipping from one office building. And and they've really given a great quality of life here, the Faroes, in Greenland, and no one's going to trade that for more McDonald's and sugar-filled foods and a Secretary of Health and Human Services that swims in filth. So, but to Trump, it's a lost opportunity, and he may just have to snatch that out of your hands and force you to live the Trump way.